But how can you be sure that someone is telling you the truth? When I went to Bible college, I believed my professors. That was a big mistake. I encourage every single person on earth to question their professors, question their preachers, question me. Believe no one except, could I have my book? Debsu? Thank you. My beautiful wife, Deborah. We're newly married, only 32 years. And in a couple weeks, it'll be 38 years since we got engaged. Went together 3 days. I asked her if she'd marry me. She said yes. We're engaged for 5 years and 7 months. Lock it in when you get a good thing. Okay, so this book was right to begin with, and this is the first thing the devil used a person to pull me away from, the King James Bible. The very first thing. The very first thing the professors did was try to tell me that it's not the oldest and the best. And the immediate, I could go on forever. You get the idea. Don't believe what people tell you. Believe what God tells you. And remember, your salvation is dependent upon the words in this book. It's not dependent, dare I say it? It's not dependent upon the doctrines of the NIV. It's dependent on the words in this book. The preachers who preached with an NIV and thought there was no difference, you can listen to them yourselves. If they were raised on the King James and they're reading an NIV or an ESV or a New American Standard or a whatever Bible, when they get to the point where something's missing and they're just standing away from the pulpit, they'll start quoting this book. Because they know those words belong there. And even if they don't see them there, they know them here. But just like in the beginning of Exodus, what happens when there's a Pharaoh that knoweth not Joseph? What happens when there's a generation that doesn't know this book? So when you hear them preach, all they've ever had were lacks of words. Like that, they moved all the, there's a laptop on top of this, but some would say I like to write, and I'm only writing when I think I have something to say. But this book right here, look what's missing. It shows you what's missing. I mean, it's exactly what it says. It compares the King James to 41 different translations. And then it very in depth tells you what those changes are, and then why they're important. And then I even have all sorts of footnotes telling any exceptions. I mean, I had fun. I'm a wonk. I love this kind of stuff. And I hate being wrong. So if somebody finds me wrong, if you find me wrong, something I say here, tell me, I'll fix it, okay? That's my promise. I've done it already. In fact, I had to change a whole section of this book because I was wrong about Codex Sinaiticus. I believed my professors. But when I confronted the evidence, I found out I was wrong. So I'm okay with that. Paleography is a con that has been pushed in Bible colleges, but you had to learn a little about it. So let me move you along the story a little bit. Do you recognize any of these pictures? Do you guys know them? Raise your hand if you recognize anything in here. Okay, so that right there, you know what that is? That's a section from the Book of the Dead that Joseph Smith reinterpreted and made into the Book of Abraham. Anybody know that story? About Mormonism? It's in the Pearl of Great Price, the third of the books that they did. There's the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. Not a lot of Mormons here, I see. Okay, so then here are the Kinderhook plates. There's some guys thought they'd pull one over on Joseph Smith, so they wrote some fake plates, and then Joseph Smith translated them by the Spirit of God. Yeah, that's the problem with being a con. You can be, say it with me, conned. If you're a con, why does the Bible say deceiving and, say it with me, being deceived? Because that's the way it works. If you're focused on conning, you can be conned. So you got other manuscripts and ancient supposed manuscripts, and I'll let you in on the other stuff in a minute. Let's just go on to the next one here. How do we date a manuscript? That's what Chris was setting us up for. How do we date a manuscript? And I'm not saying, we'll start out with a cup of coffee and we'll see where it goes from there. I mean, how do you find out how old a manuscript is? First thing you got to do, there are 4 things. I want you to go away from this conference with these 4 things. I don't want you to think about anything but these 4 things. If there's nothing else that you think about, that these 4 things stay with you. Did I make my point? Number 1, provenance. Provenance. Prove where it came from. Provenance. It has the word prove in it. Provenance. Prove where it came from. I don't care what the document is. Prove where it came from. Well, I got this saying. Look, it's a napkin. Looks just looked like Lincoln's, only it has like 18,000 more words. It's a big napkin. Trust me. Why? Because it's a napkin? Yeah, but you can look. It's an ancient napkin. It's from the 1800s. So you can grab an 1800s napkin and write on it, can't you? Prove where it came from. But proving where it came from isn't enough. Number 2 is chain of custody. Prove that it hasn't changed since that point to now. Because like Brother Chris said about Vaticanus, if you start with a document that is even was ancient, it actually was, it's validated, you find out from cross-references, other people wrote about it, they told about things that are in it, and it matches, and it falls apart the same way that the other manuscripts that are that old did, and all this, you can prove that it stayed in this box for a period of time, or whatever. The next thing you have to prove, like with the bloody glove of O.J. Simpson, is that it stayed the same from the time that it was gotten to the present time. It wasn't contaminated or modified in any way. And if it was, that you could prove what those modifications were, right? Because otherwise it doesn't help you, does it? What if somebody did get you the Declaration of Independence, the actual one, they stole it, they brought it over, and it had some extra words over here and had some other words erased? Yeah, that's not the original condition, is it? But you're not going to accept it in the new condition, are you? Well, of course not, because it's been changed. So the first one is what? Provenance. Get used to saying that word, like not providence. That's God. He does his thing. He provides. But provenance. Prove where it came from. And 2, chain of custody. Absolutely important. 3rd, chemical testing. Chemical testing? Well, don't you want to know about it? What is it made up of? How's it put together? I'm not going to give anything away, so I can't tell you too much about that. I'll get to this in just a little bit. But chemical testing is vital. If you don't have chemical testing, and we have tests now, and I don't mean non-intrusive shine a light on it. Non-intrusive shine a light doesn't do the same thing as take a piece of it and find out what it's made of. Have you heard about what happened at Walmart and some of the Walmarts, and I think even maybe Costco and some other stores? Some people wanted to what do you call it? They wanted to research backward what chemicals are in those vitamins that they say that they have there. And they went backward in it. And you know what they found out? A lot of those things weren't the chemicals that they said they were. They were grains and other things. Some of the things were things that people who take those things are not supposed to take. That's not good. There was some baby formula that was marketed by China. Be very careful. You get anything from China, they're not very good on keeping things pure and clean or free from bugging you. Like our computer systems in the United States, it just happened. But nonetheless, China had this baby formula. And the baby formula tested on the tests as having this certain vitamin that you're supposed to have in the baby formula. Protein, sorry. She knows everything. The protein they're supposed to have. But they tested it. What did it have in it, Debbie?
Well, they put melamine in the formula because there was a certain test that would measure the amount of protein that was in the formula. and the melamine would make it read higher.
So since the melamine is in there, it makes the protein read higher, and guess what it was doing? It killed over 30 babies. Just like you don't want to take certain items of pottery from certain countries because they may contain lead. Not really good to get on you, or in you, or ingest. Okay? So chemical testing is really important. There's a reason. And even though the Food and Drug Administration in our country has gotten kind of corrupt and stuff, nonetheless, there is a really good reason for it to exist. You got to know what's in it. Okay? It's not like our medical bill that we had, our medical plan. You got to pass it to find out what's in it. No. Finally, you come to 4. Source documents. What is it from? Or another way of saying it is, what is it like? What is it like that's supposed to go back in time that I can match it up to? Or if it doesn't match anything from the past, what does it match up to in the present, or sometime in between the past and the present? 4 things. Ready with me again? Provenance, chain of custody, chemical testing, and source documents. Those are the 4 things you need to determine the age of something. And did you notice I didn't mention paleography? Paleography is only what you do after everything else is done and you've done your testing and found out your information. The thing I want to tell you, I didn't know for sure who would be here. So if you don't have a King James, I'm going to say this to you. And if anybody watches this video, if you don't have a King James in your hand, listen to this. The Bible you hold in your hand may be based on a con job. It's really that simple. And those 4 tests will tell you a lot. This is Wilfrid Michael Voynich. It took me a week to get that name right. It's 1865 to 1930. He was a revolutionary, an anti-Tsarist. I think you'd call him a Marxist, Leninist, somethingist, one of those guys. He was an anti-Tsarist. And he got his degree in chemistry. Remember this. At Moscow University. He went a number of different places, but he ended up, I'm shortening the story way down because we have an hour. Moscow University gets his degree in chemistry, and he's a licensed pharmacist. Again, think about number 3. He's a licensed pharmacist. And then he had some friends who got arrested, and he tried to get him out, and he got caught. And he got sent to jail. And there's a whole romantic thing on how he found the lady who was later his wife, if you want to call it romantic. And then he gets sent off to just above Mongolia, and then up finally into Siberia. And then he escapes there with some false identification that he was able to manufacture. Remember, he's a what? Chemist, licensed pharmacist. He makes it all the way over to Hamburg and eventually to England. He's looking for a specific person. And, oh man, there's so much story. But get the idea. He's got his contacts. Let's say that. When he gets into England, he has these contacts. And, of course, the daughter of one of his, the people he gets connected with is the lady that he saw when he was in prison at the beginning, before Siberia, long before, all the way back in Poland, as a matter of fact, in Warsaw. Anyway, he ends up getting married to her after she has an affair with somebody else and writes a famous novel. So that's another story. When we get into, this is not a simple story. That's what I want you to see. There's history, provenance, finding where something comes from. There's a story that's always attached. If there's no story, it may not have happened. You with me? You with me? If there's no story, it just may not have actually happened. All right. So a guy at the British Library, which became the British Museum, then wanted, or British Museum became the British Library. Now it's called the British Library. It's the other way around. But the guy who was a curator of books said he should become an antiquarian bookseller. And amazingly, he was able to find one-off copies. He found copies for which there were not any other copies. One-off books. Isn't that amazing how he was able to just find... And they said he was amazingly lucky. You see that? Finding rare books. That's a quote. Amazingly lucky finding rare books. Now, he found when he went to a Jesuit, according to him, let's just take his story. He went to a country to where there was a Jesuit monastery, and the Jesuits were trying to sell some manuscripts. And he was there to buy them. And they said, our superior really doesn't know about this. That's not true. In the Jesuit order, they know everything. Someday I'll have to tell you about a book, but I don't have time. It's in the 1830s. Anyway, a guy escaped from Jesuit order, and he started telling his story and validated it, proved it to be true. They know everything about their people and most other things. They're very intelligent. They're connected to the whore of Babylon, you know. So there's a letter to Athanasius Kircher that since I started going through it, I found out it might be a fake as well. So there's so much questionable stuff. But please look at this letter. Says, this book, it says, Reverend and Distinguished Sir, Father in Christ. This is a letter from a guy named Johannes Marcus Marci in 1666, allegedly, wrote this letter, and he wrote it to a Jesuit priest, asking him to look at a manuscript that he had found, allegedly, okay? Because there's no other evidence that this exists other than this letter, and I'll tell you where it was found in a minute. You with me so far? Okay. This book, bequeathed to me by an intimate friend, I destined for you, my dear Athanasius, as soon as it came into my possession, for I was convinced it could be read by no one except yourself. The former owner of this book once asked your opinion by letter, copying and sending you a portion of the book from which he believed you would be able to read the remainder, To his deciphering he devoted unflagging toil, as is apparent from his attempts of his, which I send you herewith, and he relinquished hope only with his life. But his toil was not in vain. For such sphinxes as these obey no one but their master, Kircher. Accept now this token of my affection for you and burst through its bars. Dr. Raphael, tutor in the Bohemian language to Ferdinand III, the King of Bohemia, told me the said book had belonged to Emperor Rudolph, and that he presented the bearer who brought him the book 600 ducats. He believed the author was Roger Bacon, the Englishman. That's not suspect at all. When you just name all the names, everybody popular, and all of them, you start to go, oh, it's this old. Oh, no, it's even older. Oh, no, it's even older. Oh, it goes back to the 1200s. Isn't that a coincidence that somebody would name all those names like that? On this point, I suspend judgment. It's your place to define for us what view we should take thereon, to whose favor and kindness I unreservedly commit myself and remain at the command of your reverence. Johannes Marcus Marci of Kronland, Prague, 19 August 1666. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But, okay. Anybody have one of those, detectors? Too late for the boot, save the watch. It's a little deep. Okay, let's go on. But which book is Marci's letter talking about? At least let's know that. No one knows. What if someone tried to make one up? Would it be worth something? And who is Roger Bacon anyway? Roger Bacon, 1219 to 92, considered a father of empirical science. Some people say I say, yeah, no. But a father of empirical science. The idea that you search for evidence, you start with a hypothesis. I think that this happens and it does this. And then you test it to see if you have enough. If it repeats itself a little bit, you have a theory, and then after you repeat the theory, and other people can repeat the theory in different ways, and you say it's a fact. That's empirical science in a nutshell. He's considered a father of empirical science. He was the first in Europe to write down the gunpowder formula. Somebody say it came on him like a bang. Anyway, in 1256, he was admitted as a Franciscan friar. And then Pope Clement IV helped him to research in secret when it was considered not according to Catholic rules to actually do science. You with me? Okay. He produced books with references of over 1 million words in a year. This is not questioned. This is considered normal. This is considered that this guy was able to do this. Remember this when they talk about Simonides and how many words he should be able to do in the number of months he was working on Sinaiticus. Okay, he wrote on physical causation, optical lenses. Remember that That's going to be important in a minute. Astrology and alchemy. And he wanted theology to focus on the Bible. That was actually not a bad idea. All the alchemy, everybody was into alchemy. If you had a brain, they got, see if you can find a way to turn metals into gold. I mean, come on. I mean, that's an easy way to get money. The Bible says something about people who push really fast and hard to get rich and what happens to them, but nonsense. So there's multiple theories about what I'm about to show you, because I haven't showed it to you yet. But this is called the Voynich manuscript that I'm about to show you. There are a lot of theories. I just compiled them here. That's a lot. Let's simplify it a little bit. So what language is the Voynich manuscript? Well, it's either Old Welsh or Manchu or Hebrew Early German, Nahuatl, Latin, Chinese, Middle High German, Old Latin, somewhere around Germany, Old Dutch, Old Spanish, Renaissance, maybe drawing language, Ukrainian or Arabic. So now you know, everybody knows what language it is. Nobody agrees. And most of them agree that they don't know. They agree to disagree. And there's people who say the aliens wrote it. That's another story, but that didn't get done. Okay, multiple authors. Who wrote it? Well, Roger Bacon, that's the one that letter says, right? Or Francisco Hernandez, or George Hans of Limas, or revealed by an exciting spirit, or Judas, written to Jesus Christ, or the Cathars, the Albigenses, the ones that were crusaded against by the Pope, or Antonio Averlino, or Francis Bacon, not Roger, Francis, you know, the one down just before King James, Francis Bacon, or Cornelius Drebbel, or a very young Leonardo da Vinci, or Wilfrid Voynich himself, Voynich, I gotta say Voynich, I've been doing this for a week, or unknown, which is most of the people in the category. So there you go. They're all over the map. And by the way, I'm going to talk about that map in a minute. All of these theories make one big assumption, that they can figure out the text. Now, based on what you've just heard from me, do you think you're going to be able to figure out this text? They guessed that they could figure out the text by looking at it. Remember that. Let's take a look at the text ourselves. Ready? Okay, I'm not going to focus in because it has some little drawings of naked women later on. I'm not kidding, it's crazy. Brace yourselves. Why? All right. I want you to see the Voynich manuscript for yourself. One of the things I'm going to do this week, this today and tomorrow, is let you see things for yourself. And seeing the Voynich for yourself is very important. There's the cover. This is the Voynich manuscript. A lot of colors on it, huh? I want to look at this text a little bit. You want to take a look at the text? Let's zoom in a little bit, because this is really clear. Now, that obviously says, well, what do you think? There's whole movies about this text. Is it a secret code? Is it a secret language? Did aliens write it? Well, let's go further. Just keep on going down here. Let you see these unusual plants, none of which actually exist, by the way. There are parts of them that exist. I like the extent that they went on this. They called this a sunflower because reasons. They called this a sunflower. They said, see, that's a sunflower. Well, that's really interesting. And then the text around it says what exactly? Nobody knows. So we'll keep on going a little further because it's about to shift. I know it looks like a big botany book, right? Then we go a little further. Okay, here we go. Oops. We'll scoot into here, and thankfully the women aren't naked yet. Okay, so here we go. Now we got these four-looking winds thing and a bunch of circles. And there's still more stuff there with a couple eight-looking things. That doesn't do a whole lot. Then you go past it to here. And now you got what looks like a sun and a star, doesn't it? Okay. Go a little further, you see more a bunch of moons and suns and looks like groupings of stars. Do any of those exist? Of course not. Then you get to this. I'm going to tell you about this in a minute. But this looks like a design that's modified from books that existed in Voynich's own store, in his bookstore, all of which existed before 1910 when he supposedly got a hold of the manuscript. This one right here specifically, I want you to see it first here because I'm going to show it to you in a different way. Okay? See that? A little star thing and little weird symbols in the middle. And after that, it jumps into astrology. Oh, sorry, I don't want you to see the ladies. There's you know, the wrong thing here. Astrological symbol there. This is where I zoomed in at one. Oh, sorry. Just trying to get in here. Okay, Libra. Now I went, that there looks like Libra, the scales, right? Anybody remember astrology from their childhood? Okay, so astrology, and then it looks like it says, now in unsealed Greek, when you're going to take a letter out, a letter, and at the end of a line, you put a line up instead of its place. And I thought, I wonder if in medieval kind of writing they had a time where they take a letter out, just take a letter out and put a line there instead of it, like an M. So that could be Octember. So I thought, I don't know my astrology, but could Libra be October by any chance? And it is. So there are some words, and they're only the astrological ones that are written in Latin or Greek. And I checked them myself. And I only know this not because I read about it, but because I looked at it for myself. All right, so let's go on further. Yeah, this guy became obsessive with little naked ladies. And so I'm just staying back here. I'm just going to keep this way, way, way back. We'll get through it soon. We're going to get to a point where he starts changing the shapes. Now this is interesting. Do you see how that page folds out like that? No ancient document folds out. That's something that happens now. And that's something that happened in the 1800s. But that's not something, and even in the 1900s, late 1800s, maybe, but not before that. Because they'd always just, the idea is you have to have a book and you turn its pages. You wouldn't have it all fold out like that. That is a very unusual aspect. And you can see this is giant design on it. And it makes it really hard to count the pages because which one's one? Is that 1, 2, A, B, C, D, E, F, or does it go down and up? I don't know. And so people don't even number it the same. So then we go past this and we get to here. We see these funny looking things over here. Do you see that? Is that weird looking? I want you to see these things. It looks like something. I'm just not sure what. Now what's really interesting is some of these plants have a top that looks like one plant and a root that looks like another plant. Now that's an interesting thing. It's almost like somebody's trying to make something look special, but it's not. That's what cons do. They make something look special when it's not. Now look right here. Do you see on the left? You're going to see those again in just a minute. Okay? See those? Would anybody have a guess as to what one of those would be? Just really fast. Raise your hand if you have a guess about what that is. What does that look like to you? A crudely drawn what? A barrel? Okay. Anybody else? Birthday cake. Okay. Anybody else? A what? A sock. Okay. Sack? Oh, a sack. Okay. Anything else? A tower. That's another idea. Okay. Let's move in closer. See that? Okay. You're going to see it again in just a minute. Okay. We're almost done. There's another fold-out page, a double fold-out. Why? Well, some people believe that the vellum, this is all animal skin, that's vellum, that the vellum this was actually once big, and then it was just cut small, then occasionally if you wanted to do something bigger, they just, made it bigger and then fold it all in. That's the going theory. So by the time we finish with this, and we'll just get to these stars and a bunch of writing, and people have come up with all sorts of theories about it. Okay. Now, do you think you could determine what this thing is? Let's look at the writing just one more time just to be really clear on how clear this writing is. No mistaking that. Yeah, that is definitely confusion. For every theory, there's a counter theory. That's the thing about theories. If you cannot do something empirical, you cannot create an hypothesis, test it, come up with a theory, then all you've got is counter theories. Okay, so again, how do you tell where the Voynich manuscript came from? Provenance, chain of custody, chemical testing, and source documents. Is we in agreement on that? We got to do something, right? Voynich has no clear provenance. Voynich has a questionable chain of custody. Do you know where that letter was found? Supposedly? In the Voynich itself. Wow, that's convenient. And supposedly he didn't find it for like 2 years. Like, well, look at that. There it is, right there in front of me. Telling me exactly what this manuscript is and who got it and who they passed it to and everything. All in one place. Shazam. So it just happened to be in the Voynich manuscript, but not noticed until later. Okay, now if you take the last 2 letters of that guy Marcy I told you about and compare them, you'll. This is somebody else did this. This was Rich Santa Coloma. This is his work. He did a great job, and I always credit where credit is due. This is not my work. This is just checking out all the different theories and finding who made the most sense. And he went through and did what I would do, and that's check the last letters by the same guy. And they found out not only do these 2 letters from Marcy match, you can lay one on top of the other. How many of you write your signature in such a way that you can lay one signature exactly on top of another, only to change the other, like Obama's birth certificate, where you just change the one thing and then all the rest is the same? Yeah, okay. Well, that's what it is here. When you look at it, it's just an overlay. Almost what a counterfeiter would do. If you say set one on top of another or just sat there going like this right down the line. You know what's really funny about it? The one here, the other one from 1665 wasn't actually written by Marcy, and nobody knows who really wrote it, but it wasn't him. All the ones before were written by Marcy, and I've seen the collection, I have it. And if you go through the collection, they're completely different. Whoever wrote that letter that was copied for this letter copied the wrong guy. It wasn't even Marcy's letter. So, yeah, I thought you'd like to see that. This took me weeks. I love this. But so just one, Marcy didn't write the last letter. That's not an actual example of Marcy's writing, so whoever wrote and signed that letter may not have even known that fact. So Voynich had some chemical testing. The calf skins are different thicknesses. Now, if you're making one book, and you get in these calf skins or vellum, you get a whole set of vellum and you put them together. But this is almost like someone, I don't know, grabbed a whole bunch of different vellum pieces from other places and just kind of blended them together, put it together, and made their own little book out of it. Kind of like grabbing spare pieces of paper in the classroom when you got to get something to make a book with your kids. And I come home from my bookstore and I've got some of the card stock stuff that I got from some of the books we had to rip off the cover from college texts, and then I have some other paper that was lined and some other paper that was not, and I just put it all together, and my kids, especially Sarah, would just draw all over. This is like that. Isn't that amazing? So there are 4 different sections that were tested, and they only tested them one time. You know, when you test something chemically, you can't just test one little piece of it. You need to do it a couple times to find consistency, especially if you're doing carbon dating, which is very questionable. Carbon-14 resulted in different dates, and then the interpreters who are quoted in everywhere from Wikipedia to encyclopedias and TV shows and everything, averaged the dates together to get a 1400s date. I don't want to go into all the theories. I'm just going to get you an idea, okay? So when you read about this, you're going to get a whole bunch of lies. I'm just giving you the facts. Now, 3, the ink was too widely available to be tested itself, but Voynich was a chemist. He was able to create inks. Voynich's friend checked out a book on mixing medieval inks. No kidding. This is documented. At the same time he's doing these things, he's got a friend who checked out a book on mixing medieval inks to make them look ancient. And tests found slightly unusual copper, zinc, and titanium compound in an unknown binding agent. So it wasn't even in the classification system for the dating company in Texas. Just one more thing. Just one more thing. Source documents. The drawings are amazingly similar to other objects from pre-1910 books that could be found in Voynich's bookstore. There. Remember that one I told you to look at? This right here, I have a copy of this. This is a diatom that could only be seen in the middle 1800s through the microscope that had been developed, and then the drawing was produced and put into this book right here, Microscope and Its Revelations by Carpenter. So that's the book right there. And so what this guy did, that guy I told you about, is he overlaid the one to the other. The green is this, and the other. And you notice there's an awful lot of similarities. He did this with a lot of different objects. That's a field tube inside a microscope. Does that look familiar to you now? That means that's a tube that you put inside the microscope. When you're setting up the microscope, you put the other part inside it, and you have the outside, the optical piece. That's a field tube right there. That's 17th century, from 1600s. Couldn't be from the 1200s if it's from the 1600s, could it? Just one of those funny things about that. If it's from the 1600s, again. And then the diatom is from the 1800s, and that doesn't fit the 1200s either for the story. There's cylinders. There's some 17th century Spanish microscopes on the right. Some definite similarities there. It's almost like somebody was trying to make something look like it was advanced, but not. And I can't go into the whole story about that. I'll go on. This is a root that Voynich manuscript has. And on the right, again from Carpenter's book, The Microscope and Its Revelations, that's a marine organism. It almost looks like he took something that's from a real book, drew most of it, and then changed part of it in order to give it the idea that they had advanced revelation back in the ancient times, in order to sell this ancient document as the long-lost missing document, again, based on another piece of paper that was in the Voynich book. This is Voynich's bookstore, 1908 picture. This right here is look at that. Look how much this is. Look at all this stuff here. And this is an interesting room covered with a black cloth filled with a whole bunch of ancient vellum. Almost like you could take that vellum and take somebody who'd maybe studied how to make medieval inks, put them all together, and make yourself a book. And there you go. There he is right there. That's Voynich among his books. So what do you think? Do you trust the Voynich manuscript? If you trust it, just raise your hand on high. Yeah, okay. So now, that other map I showed you is called the Vinland map. It was supposedly dated from before Columbus came to America in the mid-1400s. There's that map again. Take a look at this map. That's supposed to be an ancient map. People talked about it, wrote about it, because you can look over here. It's supposed to be before Columbus, and yet, look, here's the British Isles, and here's the beginning of Americas, and there's a thing called Vinland. Like they found the story that, Leif Erikson found it, So there's this map that nobody's ever had before with this kind of detail from that date. If you date the parchment, and they actually dated the parchment, and they got a date somewhere. They said, well, it's the 1400s all the way up to the 1480s at the maximum according to carbon dating, but look, that's still before Columbus, because it was 1492 that Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That's great, but have you dated the ink? You see where we're going with this? I'm honestly messing with you. I'm giving you things that have no emotional value to you, to cement a concept that you need to have with things that do have emotional value to you. No clear provenance for the Vinland map. Brandeis University, 1957, Enzo Ferrajoli, a shady book dealer imprisoned for stealing rare books, had it. That's where it came from. Bam! Oh, look, I have this book. In 1959, Paul Mellon bought it for $1 million. And nothing like it has ever been found. 2, no chain of custody until after 1957. 3, chemical testing showed the map was coated in an unknown substance. We're talking about Macron, testing labs, found an unknown substance it was coded in. It wasn't part of their database. The map was in 2 pieces and intricately labeled, missing the folds by millimeters. In other words, they anticipated the folds by writing to a point, stopping, then continuing on the other side of where the fold was going to be and writing further. No ancient manuscript in all of history has had. That's a modern thing. We do that now. Unlike any ancient map. Third, the ink was not iron gall, which is what you would expect. If it's iron gall, then it's just an old medieval ink. But it was a base of yellow and a sooty thin overlay. That was the second time they went over the manuscript again in the 1990s. They found out that there's this yellow tracing that went on the bottom. And then somebody took a thin kind of charcoal-y thing, but a thin nub, and then drew on top of it so it would look like iron gall. The underlying yellow had titanium dioxide in it, which had only been in use since the 1920s. Do you trust the Vinland map now? If you watch a documentary and they tell you, this mysterious Vinland map, would you believe it? So, source documents, none, but it's not necessary because chemical testing, number 3, already proved it to be a fake. So now let's talk about something that has more value, 2427. 2427, is it proof of Codex Vaticanus? Dum dum dum. It's the Gospel of Mark with tiny illustrations. You are about to see it because I told you while I'm here, I have this stuff because I do not like believing people. I've been hornswoggled too many times. I like getting it, having it, and then showing it to everybody. So first, it's the Gospel of Mark with tiny illustrations. It's only this big. In 1917, it showed up in a dead man's attic. Oh look, there's this book in the attic. It was in Athens, Greece, but it has no chain of custody until after, number 2, 1917. Eventually, it ended up going over to the University of Chicago. I've told about this in this book right here, under the chapter called Prove It. So there's more about it there. But paleography, rated at category 1. I'll get you that in a second. Here, look at this book. This is the text of the New Testament. This is Barbara and Kurt Eland, the premier text people after Mesker. And look on the left. On the left there, that actually is the last page of 2427. On the right side, it tells you about the categories of text manuscripts. What do we accept as being genuine? Okay? What level will we get it? And right here, category 1, manuscripts of a very special quality which should always be considered in establishing the original text, e.g. the Alexandrian text. See, it's just telling you. They just shoved it under your door and just told you the original text is Alexandrian. Did you catch that? E.g. the Alexandrian text belongs here. The papyri and unseals up to the 3rd and 4th century belong here almost automatically because they represent the text of the early period. And as you'll find out in what we're going to show you, and hopefully you're going to show the Gnostic, are you going to show any of the Gnostic stuff of the manuscript, or are you going to talk about that, and am I going to make sure I get that out?
I probably will.
You probably will? Okay. But let's just tell you, Gnostic, if I went to a Gnostic church and I went to the Gnostic library, well, let's say I went to a religious science church and a religious science library, and I've got a religious science Bible, do you think it's going to be the pure text, or do you think it's going to be modified slightly? Right? Would you trust it? Nah, maybe not. Okay. The same idea. Category 2 has these, and it goes down the line. The funny thing is, they dated this manuscript because of its paleography. They looked at the manuscript and thought they knew the dating. They thought the handwriting analysis told us that this is about the age that they did it, sort of. That maybe it was as late as the 13th century, but because it makes the Vaticanus look good, and because it's mostly like the Codex Vaticanus, they rated it a category 1, simply because of the words that it had. Not because of the date of the manuscript. You with me? This is right. I have 2 copies of this book. This is our standard text, so you can read it for yourself. I put it on my YouTube page channel too. Paleography is unusual, so it's unusually sloppy. Do you know that I don't know if you know about the Voynich, is it was fairly sloppy except for the handwriting. It was kind of like, and it repeats the same kind of patterns over and over in different ways, ever so slight different ways, because humans can't just do the same thing over and over. They have to make slight changes, and they do. But they still have patterns of what they do in those changes. And that book is like that. It just makes no sense. It's unusually sloppy, but the drawings of those scientific, those instruments, those things on the side, the plants were sloppy. Did you notice how the paint was put on the Voynich was really sloppy? Did you notice there is even some erasure and redos and some stuff? It's like, ugh, sloppy. Did you know that in handwriting analysis, when you're a cop or FBI, I've read a lot of books on this, I love this subject, that when you detect someone's handwriting, you can find a person who is unusually duplicitous by whether they write a 9 in such a way that it could be a 0 or a 6 or a 5. And those are people who are probably stealing money from the company, especially if they happen to be treasurer. So there's the unusually sloppy. Next, 1300s to 1700s, uncertain handwriting. Boy, is it. I tried to read the Greek and I'm going, how did they do it? It's quite a feat to read that stuff. There are 3 strange sets of missing words, but it's so similar to Vaticanus that it was too tantalizing to classify it as a fake. This is my Nestle Allen Greek English New Testament. Oh, really? Okay. I'm running through it as fast as I can. Nestle Allen, 27th edition. I want you to look at the orange things. Those orange things are the markings of Codex 2427, and every one of those is showing you that's a reading that's in the Codex 2427 that they put as category number 1 to justify a reading that's in the Greek Testament. Just happens to back Vaticanus, right? All the way up to 16. There, that was 2427. I went through it really fast. I'll go through it again later when we have more time, okay? But there, that's 2427. There's the whole thing. That's what it actually looks like. It's only, that big, 5.5 inches. So somebody wrote it small. And then you look at this, you got this art. Some people say, well, what if the text could be really old, and what about the art? Well, let's check it out. Let's just run real fast. 2427. Might have to pick this up later tonight. I really want you to see this stuff. This is important because this was regarded as so important. Okay, there it is. There's that last page that you saw in the other book. Okay. Provenance, Athens 1917, chain of custody 1917, chemical testing, Prussian blue, not available till 1720, synthetic ultramarine blue, not available till after 1820, zinc white after 1825, and zinc sulfide, fluorescent, not available till after 1874. Well, it could still have been written in the past, and then they put the drawings on top. Doesn't work. The ink is on top of the art, not the other way around. So there you go. What if it was copying a true ancient document? Then you have to do something. Look for, number 4, source documents. Okay, this is Debbie's drawing of Stephen Carlson, a Catholic. He had Cardinal Mies Vaticanus. He found out, I got to summarize. He found out by going to a Jesuit university, following it through, that Cardinal Mies Vaticanus had errors in it. Another guy named Philip Buttman made an edition of Vaticanus in 1860, before Tischendorf came out, and it had the same errors as Cardinal Mies' document. Plus, he had specific errors that he had made, or specific text choices, let's say, that he had made. Well, guess what? 2427 matches all of them, which means that's the source document. Do you trust Codex 2427? So how does Sinaiticus measure up? Running up fast. Provenance, unknown to the West before 1844 or 59. It depends on how you run it. And so much I want to tell you. Maybe at dinner or something, or after tonight. Chain of custody, only for sure from late 1859 when it was taken to Russia. And that's still being checked. Chemical testing has been 0. Oh, I'd like to get to that. Source documents are being checked now. The Zosimus manuscript is what this guy Simonides that Chris was talking about said it was from. And I have friends who are examining Zosimus manuscript now. And they're looking at it and comparing it to Sinaiticus. They've already found some really interesting stuff. So again, what are our 4 things we do to dig some manuscript? Provenance, chain of custody, chemical testing, and source documents. Where did it come from? How do you know? Did it come to us unchanged? How do you know? What did the chemical test show? And is it a copy of something else? What? Paleography is the con that you can date a manuscript, say with me, just by looking at it. I made it.